Welcome, everybody, to the Making of a Nobody live stream series. I'm your host, Sejal Thacker, and really excited to continue a conversation that we started a couple weeks ago. For those of you that have been joining us, you know that a couple weeks ago, I started a conversation with our VP of Research and Innovation, Donald Farmer, and Min Bogata, who's our director of our Idea Lab. And we started talking about, a question that I'm always running into is, what are the kind of companies you're building? How do you decide what companies to build? Are there focus areas? And so we started to kind of get into that conversation. And so let's just pick up where we left off. Welcome back to the show, Donald, and great to see you again, Mark. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Hazel.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Let's do it. And so why don't we summarize for those of people that maybe missed the first episode, which, by the way, you can catch all of the prior episodes on our YouTube channel. But maybe we can just quickly summarize, Donald, and if you want to kick it off, just,
Sure.
what are some of the ways that we decide on the focus areas that we talked about? Maybe if you could just give us a quick summary of what we talked about last time.
Yeah, well, I think one of the key things that came out of the last conversation was that we actually do have focus areas, and we're kind of prescriptive about those, which is to say we're not just out there looking for ideas. Come to us with great ideas. It's not that kind of process. Rather, we have specific focus areas that we target. So travel and hospitality, clean energy, ed tech, education technology, things like that. We have a set of them that we're particularly interested in. Within those areas, we have theses about what's changing, what's important, what's emerging. And when you bring these together, and then you also look at what's happening in technologies, we have theses about, for example, what's happening in educational technology, what's happening in health and wellness is really important. We have what's happening in technology as well. You bring these subject areas together, you bring the theses together, you bring the technology changes. In the intersection of these things, and the kind of Venn diagram overlap, that's where we start to look for where can we build businesses. So we're actually I like to say that we're not a fund, we're a factory. We have specific ideas about what we want to build, and then we look at how we can best build them. We have a process for doing that, and I think that's one of the things which makes us very different, makes us very focused, but also will help us to be very, very effective in doing it, because we're not going to be distracted away by the bright shiny objects of new things happening. We have our fundamental kind of thesis of what's important to us.
Yeah, Mark, do you want to add anything on that? Because I know we spent a lot of time talking about health and wellness last time, and we're going to jump into some of the other focus areas. But do you want to add anything else to kind of summarize our conversation from last time?
Yeah, I mean, I think Donald did a great job just in terms of we care a lot about certain areas, right? And our job is to make sure we understand what we think are the theses in those categories, right? So you look at things like health and wellness, we say, okay, what is the thesis there? We think that themes. We think the themes are going to be health and, mental health, addiction, plant medicine, sleep and dreams, and longevity. I think those are the three, those are the five themes that are going to be really interesting. And then we think there's a theme or the thesis that goes across it, which says we actually believe that empowering the patient is going to be a theme. So using those things as a triangulation is really helpful for us, right? To get into the narrow factor.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so we spent a lot of time talking about, and thanks, Mark, for highlighting health and wellness is one of the areas that we're really building and innovating in right now. And Dr. Reese, who's the director of our health and wellness team, is going to be joining Mark and I on November 3rd. So for those of you that are interested in learning more about what we're doing, please make sure to join us on November 3rd. But Mark, let's jump into one of our other areas. Travel and hospitality is another one we've got a lot of stuff going on with. So talk to us a little bit about the vision for what are the areas we plan on innovating in that specific focus area of of travel and hospitality.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some interesting themes going on there, right? So one, it's been a consistent producer of really great startups in the last 20 years. So going back to Expedia and Travelocity and sites keep popping up that I'm like, how can that could exist? And it keeps existing. So I think that as we look at the global trends, you're going to see people with more disposable income, right? And so more travel and more, family, you know, high end visits, like things are going to start to shift in a way that have not been in the last 20 years. So we look at it as like a lucrative market, but I also think that the shifting is, there's a lot of dynamics that are happening, right? So for one, if you know anybody in the hospitality space, they'll tell you that it's really hard to find people. Like if you try to check into a hotel in the last, year, you've seen that, the wait lines are really long. So we look at things like, people quitting work or wanting more higher, compensation is a shift towards, okay, what does that mean? That means more kiosks. That means more keyless entry. That means more, app kind of based kind of things. So that's kind of questions we like to ask ourselves. Like, where does this actually going to go? Donald?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You and I both, and probably all three of us, all travel probably too much. But we're very used to this experience that there is more and more travel. You talk to people about their travel experience these days, though it's often kind of miserable. People complain about travel. They do more of it, but they complain about that process. So I think there's a lot that we can do to help people. I was recently traveling in Europe, and I was actually traveling on a pretty economical basis for this particular tour. So it wasn't like I was, flying first class everywhere and going to the front of the line. But actually, I could tell I was navigating that system much more efficiently than the other people who were lining up for hours because I was actually equipped with knowledge. It was knowledge that enabled me to do that. And I knew where the shortest lines would be. I knew where to get the free service that got me, checked in early. I knew how to use the keyless entry, all these sort of things. And just that knowledge enabled me to navigate the system. So I think purely in terms of the logistics of travel, we can really help people with knowledge. And there's lots of things that you can do to pool that knowledge to bring in the wisdom of the crowds. What's the best place? This airport. What's the best way to navigate through this hotel system? Whatever it happens to be. The other thing I hear all the time from people who are traveling is that they want to travel better, not just the logistics of it, but they want to be more sustainable. They want to be more ethical. They want to be more engaged when they travel. And those are areas where we can really do some interesting work as well.
Yeah, those are great points. I mean, when I just think about my own travel experiences as a mother, I've spent hours and hours just researching and planning ahead to just make sure we can have like an experience that's going to work for us, right? And we have different unique needs and things too that we want. So I love the vision. So what are some of the opportunities, Donald, that you're finding in your research as you're kind of looking into this area for us? What are some of the areas that we can expect to put a footprint in as we're starting to build in some of those areas?
So yeah, there's a couple of areas which are around sometimes described as ecotourism, which I think as always is one of those broad terms which covers a lot of subtlety and complexity within that. But there's sort of conservation travel. There's also the idea of regenerative tourism, which is where rather than seeing tourism as something which is imposed on a community or something which extracts value from a community, actually gives back to the community when it's there. Not necessarily in terms of money, but actually in terms of education, investing in social enterprises, so that you can combine, for example, investing in a social enterprise with going there and sharing your knowledge or sharing your expertise in that social enterprise. That makes tourism turns tourism from something which is actually exploitative to something which is regenerative within the community. But to make that work requires us to bring a whole lot of pieces together that traditional tourist sites aren't interested in doing. And there's great opportunities for people to become brokers, to become engaged in that process, to make it better. Another area that I've been super interested in recently has been people who have allergies, special needs of various sorts, with their disabilities. How do they travel? And I found, for example, I've got a friend who's highly allergic. but still wants to be able to travel? What is the airline that uses a hypoallergenic cleanser on the plane so that she doesn't immediately go into toxic shock just getting on the plane? What are the hotels that offer entire floors of allergen-free accommodation? Things like that. Now, there's ways in which you can learn that. You combine it with other aspects of people who need special access and things like that. That starts to get pretty interesting. And then, of course, one area which we've all learned to do over the last few years has been working in virtual and hybrid events, which can be combined with in-person. We all know that in-person is really important in business travel. Has to happen. And yet at the same time, it's not binary. It's not either you're in person or you're remote. And interestingly, this even ties into tourism. I saw a lot of interesting resorts, for example. I think I saw a resort in Singapore, Sentosa, which, when it was completely locked down and couldn't have visitors, created a virtual version of itself that people could go and visit. And they did a great job of it. I saw a couple of places in Vegas trying to do something similar. So it's not that it's either or, it's how do I combine those experiences? So when I've been somewhere, I can kind of revisit it virtually, but I know what it's like, so I enjoy that experience more. I think there's just a ton of things like this that are happening. So we can bring in the virtual experience with VR, AR kind of technologies. We can bring in AI and automation to help people with navigation and to help people with logistics. And we can provide community and brokerage and information and knowledge experiences which help people find the travel that is right for them, whatever their specific requirements are. And we can build these regenerative experiences as well, which I think will be very important.
Yeah, thanks. That's so helpful to give people an idea of what we're doing differently at the studio. And so, Mark, maybe you could share a little bit more about, I know we've got a great team of people that are working in this area within the studio. Maybe you could share a little bit about what they're doing and any insights and things that we can expect to see from that team. Oh, is Mark frozen? He might be frozen.
He looks frozen up there, yeah.
Yeah, he does look frozen up. Okay, maybe Donald, you want to start? If you have the information to answer that question, I know we've got an advisory board that's already working on this issue, and hopefully Mark will just drop out and join us in a second.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been really interested in, for example, from the advisory board, is dealing with things like short-term rentals. A really good example of that. And you need to bring to people who've got experience of that and the complexities of that, the technicalities of that. There are some really crude and simple ways of doing it. There are some much better and much more enriching ways of doing it that would actually help. And an example of that is that, short-term rentals are seen as both very valuable by people who are renting out properties, but actually many communities see them as very damaging, because they reduce rental properties and can we bring those two interests together in a way? And one of the things that we can do as a studio with our ability to develop applications rapidly and to develop platforms rapidly is we can be more agile in this case. We don't have to build one solution and that's it for the next sort of few years, and you then impose that solution on other people. By bringing together both our technical abilities to rapidly develop and our expertise from the advisory boards, we can be much more agile in the way that we both build platforms and respond to the impact of what we're doing. Yeah, so we can have this two-way process, which I think is really important to us.
I love that, Donald. And I would just add that, just the fact that we've got nobodies all over the globe, I think that there's always this concern of, and you were starting to touch on that a little bit too, is how do we build in a way that also promotes the culture of the different places that we're, building in. And so having nobodies that can provide those diverse perspectives to this process as we're building, I think differentiates in a lot of ways compared to other startups that may be looking to build in this area as well, right? So
yeah, that's really important. We are such a widely distributed organization ourselves.
There he is. Welcome back, Mark.
Hey, sorry about that.
No problem. We kept the conversation going.
I know. I went to reach for a button and anyway, hi. You
Okay,
asked a great question. Please do it again.
okay, welcome back. So what I was wanting to share some information, and Donald talked about some of the good things that are coming out of the team that's already working in this space of travel and hospitality. But maybe you could give us behind the scenes peek of who's working in that space. What are some of the things where we can expect to see from that team, and just kind of give us a peek behind the scenes of what's going on in that space in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'd say. What I think people need to hear. Right. We're I think we're very fortunate in terms of the people who supported us. Right. In terms of angels and early ambassadors, that we just woke up one day and realized that we had this amazing cadre of people who had deep experience in hospitality and travel. Right. So I won't drop names here, but we've got former CEO of one of the largest casinos on the East Coast. We've got one of the largest VIP hosts for some of the biggest stars on the planet. We've got someone who's runs one of the VIP travel agencies for high net worth individuals. We got a former executive from TripAdvisor. So just some really great human beings who got involved in the studio early on, as angel investors. But when we said, hey, if we're smart, we should build an advisory board around these guys. And so this is what we did. We created an advisory board around these humans that are just, good people who care about nobody. And we give them the cinema structure to figure out how to talk about what they think is happening in the space and challenge our own ideas and bring things to life. And, they've got some networks that are pretty powerful. So is that a good answer?
That's a good answer. Yes, we're really excited. Donald and I are just talking about all the, the fact that we have a global network outside of the advisory board of nobodies that can give their diverse perspectives, that we can still find ways to maintain the culture of all the different areas that we're going to be leaving a footprint in. So lots of great things to come. I know we're running almost halfway point now. So I do want to shift and at least cover one other area. So let's talk about, whichever one you both want. We've got FinTech, we've got clean tech. Donald mentioned EdTech. We've got lots of other focus areas. Mark, which other area do you want to make sure we cover during today's? And I knew we were going to have a part 3. I predicted.
I know. I'll let Donald decide.
All right.
Well, why not? Let's talk about FinTech. I think that's people are always interested in FinTech. I think that's a really good one. And interestingly for me, it has a sort of segue from travel and hospitality because, well, this, Mark, you've been involved in funding. I advise investors all the time on technology issues and due diligence and researching the market. One thing about FinTech is it's built on trust. And the reason that relates to travel is because so often you have to actually travel to be in person with someone, to see them face to face, to build that trust and say, okay, now we can do something. And one of the things which has been really interested in FinTech in the last few years has been, and of course driven by COVID, as so many things have been, but by other things as well, have been attempts to build systems of trust that don't require that in-person interface. Not totally successful in getting rid of the in-person interface, but trust, security, compliance, governance, all that is really critical components of FinTech. And I'm really interested in ways in which we can build trust into FinTech systems. Again, ways which are agile, adaptive, which fit with our progressive technology and methodology, and which fit with our principle of, as much as possible, bringing the power from centralized organizations to the people who are actually doing the work or doing the deals. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm particularly interested in FinTech within the studio. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I 100% believe that we have to figure out how to create trust. I think it's about access. When I think of FinTech, I think about access. How do you give power to people that, the stats will tell you that, something like 70, 80% people don't have access to things that, you and I would take for granted, right? Sajal and Mark and Donald, and we all navigate our own financial, issues, but we still have access to things, right? We can call people and we can know how to do things. So I think bringing that access to people is really interesting to me, especially on our global perspective. So
Love
Yeah,
it.
that's actually really important. This question of access. One of the people, when we talk about fintech, very often think of it as being, the 1% moving their shares around or whatever, or their assets, which is of course a very important part of fintech. But really, it touches people much more directly than that. One of the largest kind of one of the largest flows of money in the world that moves around the globe are what we call remissions. People who are working abroad, sending money back home. And yes, that can be, somebody in the global 1%, but more often it's somebody, from the Philippines working in the British Virgin Islands and having to send money back to their family. And trying to do that both efficiently, of course, because they don't want to be paying large fees, but trying to do that with the trust and with the security, trying to do it in ways so that the transactions are reliable, the
yeah,
transactions are manageable, they've got insight. It's such an important thing, and
yeah.
a neglected area.
And Donald, you and I have talked about this a lot. Like remissions is actually an area that I'm very passionate about, but trying to figure out how we create efficiency, right? Because there's people who pay way too many fees,
Oh yeah,
right? And it's a great business to be built, right? Um, you know, can't take the capitalist out of us, right? We're still going to try to make money in the process, but at the end of the day, when I hear people talk about the fees they pay, and I've got family in Mexico, and I'm a pretty global person. Like I hear the fees, I'm like, this sounds wrong, right? There must be a better way, right? So I
absolutely.
love that kind of question.
Yeah,
And it's
thank
one
you.
of these areas where it's good for us because it involves, of course, there's a technological aspect to it, and that's really important. But there's also, deeply human aspect to it. There's community aspects. There's ways in which we could, do very unique things, like enable people to bundle their transactions and then unbundle them at the destination, so they only pay a fee on a bundled transaction. All sorts of things that could be done. Um, there's so many examples of ways in which the studio in particular could take, kind of unique concepts, especially because they're exactly the kind of thing that the larger vendors might not even want to get into, never mind think about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I love everything that both of you are saying. And so, what are some of we know that that's a focus area. You both done such a great job at identifying some challenges in that areas or problems that we want to address. What are some priorities? What are some of the quick, what can we expect, let's say, in the next couple of years? What are some of the new codes or some ideas that might be floating around that we can, expect to hear more about? Mark, do you want to take that one?
Well, I say that we be coy for a reason, um, and we'd love to hear the audience kind of chime in. Um, we know we're trying to build, and at the end of the day, great companies only happen with great founders. So there might be some people who would listen to this tomorrow or the next day or today that say, "I'm the right guy, right? I'm the right girl, right?" So I think, we have some ideas and we're charging forward, but yeah, this is not probably the place to talk openly about our ideas, but just looking for good people.
Awesome. Awesome. There you go. You got an invitation from Chief Nobody himself telling you to join our journey. Donald, do you want to add anything about, just based on your research, what are some opportunities that, you think we should be looking at? And anything else you want to add about FinTech before we wrap up today's episode?
Well, I think what the really critical, pardon me, the really critical thing here is to understand that we don't just want to do things better. We want to do things differently. There's a different way of doing things. So many business ideas that emerge are just things that are ideas that other people could have, and they may execute on them better. They may execute on them more quickly and therefore get an advantage. They may have an early mover advantage in the market. They may have a wide or a deep moat. Um, None of that addresses what we can do differently, what we can do more insightfully, and what we can do with our principles and values. And that's one of the reasons I think these talks and are reaching out to the community is so important. It's not just about having a cool idea and coming to us with a cool idea. It's actually about, can you work with our values? Do they resonate with you? And therefore, can you come to us and be a nobody? And if you can be a nobody, then great things will happen. That's a really important part of it for me. It's not just about the cool idea. It's about the values coming together with, as Mark says, with great people. That's really what will make the difference.
Yes. Mark, do you want to say something? Yes. Thank you so much, Donald. My heart is literally melting as we're standing here. I know.
No, I think Donald said it perfectly. Like, we just need to do our absolute best to resonate at the right level as an organization. And I'm sure, because I've been proven for the last 3 years, that we'll track the right people to the journey. But yeah.
There you have
Thank
it.
you.
There you have it. Wow, this was a powerful episode. I feel like they just get better and better every single week as we connect, as we get to know each other, as we continue to dig deeper into our vision and what we want to do. So as Mark and Donald both said, if anything that we said today resonates with you, if you want to be a part of this journey, go check out our website, listen to our prior episodes, reach out to any one of us on the leadership team or anybody in our studio as a nobody, and let's talk. Let's build together. Awesome. We'll see everybody next week at the same time, same place. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Good to see you all. Thank you.
Bye.